Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Dungeons & Dragons Academy. It's Dwayne here, and today we're going to be talking about how to put some descriptions into your D&D sessions that'll really spice it up for your players. So let's clear this up right away. I am not a world-famous storyteller, nor have I published an amazing series of books. I am simply a dungeon master who's been playing this game a long time. So a lot of the views and opinions that you're going to get from me and a lot of the tips are based solely on that. Now that I've got that out of the way, let's talk a little bit about how we can actually take some of these calm moments in Dungeons & Dragons, some of these exciting moments in Dungeons & Dragons, and really make them pop with some really great descriptions. So while you're playing Dungeons & Dragons, your players, for the most part, are relying on you as the Dungeon Master to paint the picture in their mind as to what they're experiencing and what they're seeing. This is no more evident than when you actually buy a published adventure, for example. You, the Dungeon Master, are reading all of the great story content, all the great things that are happening, and you might have a whirlwind of your imagination going on about what this could all look like. But again, you are the filmmaker in this. Your players rely on you. So some of the things that I've learned to do over the years of playing Dungeons & Dragons is take some of the things that we take for granted when we're actually playing D&D and give them a little bit of an extra focus. So by that I mean it can be something as simple as the ground they're walking on. Think of it as engaging all of the senses of the characters and focus in on one or two of them. There's no need to be this masterful storyteller where you're spending 5 minutes describing everything about the environment they're in, every noise, every sound. Focus on one or two items. Just craft a very simple sentence. For those of you who are novice Dungeon Masters, or even those of you who have been playing Dungeons & Dragons for a long time, a lot of the times just that simple little adjective can really spark the imagination in your players. So I'm going to give you an example of something very common that we always do in D&D is we travel. We walk from place to place or horse ride from place to place. But typically when players are walking, those are the moments where we sometimes can take those moments for granted and focus on more of the exciting moments like sword play and combat and spell casting, which all deserve the attention of some amazing descriptions. But sometimes just a simple act can come to life just with a few narrative words. I'll give you an example. Example A is you have a group of players who are just traveling across a trail, and Dungeon Master A might say you're walking down a path and you see a cave in front of you. Okay, and that's a perfectly valid way to describe that there's nothing wrong with that. Dungeon Master B says, I want to take this up a little bit, just give them a little bit of something to latch onto and maybe just spark some imagination in your mind. And again, not a 5-minute description, but take that same sentence. So Dungeon Master B says, you're walking along the dirt path and you can hear the noise of your feet scraping around the loose gravel. Ahead of you is a cave entrance covered by vines and overgrowth. Okay, and that actually may have been a little bit too much. But that said, take a listen to both and you can see how just those couple little adjectives are going to just sort of spark that imagination in the players' minds. I like to focus on the 5 senses, obviously, but at the same time, you don't need to do all of them. So whether that be sight, smell, hearing, taste, whatever is applicable, just focus on one. Another example is if players are traveling across snow. What does it feel like and what does it look like when we walk in snow in our life, right? The crunching sound of the snow as the players step onto it, the wet feeling as it sort of penetrates the boots and seeps into your socks and gets your socks wet. What does it smell like outside? That crisp air of the coldness, right? The wind blowing, either hearing it or feeling it. So just making sure that you focus in on that. These are environmental things, of course. So those are probably natural things that are going to come easy to you and think about. But it gets a little bit complicated when you start dealing with things like spells, weapons, as well as creatures. And creatures can be quite difficult as well. An example for weapons. Take the material strength of the weapons or the material that the weapons are made out of, for example. When players are using swords, a simple descriptive flair can be something like, instead of just swinging at the goblin and missing, you can say, you swing at the goblin and your sword clashes against his sword as he parries your blow, aka you didn't hit. the clanging of your swords, clanging being the adjective, as they connect. A wooden staff, has a different property, right? And maybe different sounds and descriptive to go with it. So if a staff is being used, you sweep the legs of the man in front of you, and you can feel the vibrations through the wood as it connects with his legs and he falls to the ground. Which is something improv, not the best at improv. But taking a step back and just thinking about what are some of the actual physical properties of the things involved, whether that be equipment, laying down on a backpack. Let's just say the players are setting up for camp for the night, and you want to give it a little bit of a descriptive flair, just to make it sort of give them a sense of what's happening. You can say to them as you unravel your camping pack for the night, you unfurl your sleeping bag, or whatever they call it in Dungeons and Dragons, and you fluff up your pillow. As you lay your head down on it, your head sinks into the soft fabric. There you go. So a lot of the times it's just taking a step back, thinking about some of the actual physicality of the items or the things you're describing. Noises become trickier, monsters especially. I tend to insert lots of squeals, lots of screeches. It might even do good to actually brainstorm a list of adjectives that would go along with some of the actions that commonly occur in Dungeons and Dragons. Look up for adjectives for yelling, screaming, and pain, bellowing, growling, those kinds of things. Hurling when we're referring to daggers. So a lot of descriptives, but the biggest thing is not to overdo it. So take your time. Craft a very simple sentence maybe, and don't worry about, you might see other dungeon masters online just throwing massive amounts of beautiful descriptions at their players. And albeit that's pretty amazing if you can do that, but to tread the line between what's overdoing it and what will accomplish what you need, which is just to trigger their imagination. We're not here to write a book in real time. Now, there is one more technique that you can use, and it is not an actual fact verbalizing your descriptions, but it is something that I use in conjunction with my verbal descriptions. And I call them imagination boosts or imagination boosters to my players. And essentially, it basically just involves, seeing as I play a lot of online D&D these days, basically involves referencing images. I go onto Google Images quite often, actually, and will look up scenes that I think are appropriate. Monsters, for example, if you have a players encountering a monster, it's okay to show players pictures of a monster. That's step one of an imagination boost, but make sure that that's not where you end it. So if you are going to show them a picture of a lizard man or a goblin or an ogre or a giant, show them the picture, but then describe the picture to them. So not only are they seeing the actual picture itself, but they're actually going to get some sort of extra fluff by the way that you describe it, if you feel comfortable doing it. One of the problems I fell into early as a dungeon master, as a young dungeon master, was that I would just show players pictures and stop there and think that that would be enough to boost their imagination. And while a well-drawn picture can do that, like they say, a picture is worth 1,000 words, if you have the ability and you have the know-withal, feel free to smatter a little bit of descriptive to go along with it, and your players will appreciate it for sure. I would love to hear any kind of techniques that you have as dungeon masters, or any experiences that you've had, as well as using descriptions in your games. What worked, what didn't work, and maybe some tips for me as well as maybe my audience as well. So make sure that you leave a comment, and as well subscribe and hit notifications because we have lots more content coming at you. Thanks again. Have a great day.